If you're wondering how to get into anime or having a hard time finding a new show to watch, then this video is made for you. Everyone has had a different starting point with anime, and some people haven't even started yet. When you ask somebody for the best introduction to the genre, you'll hear a few things. Full Metal Alchemist, Attack on Titan, Death Note, and probably a long-running show such as Naruto. Look, these are all great answers, but they only focus on a few genres. I strongly believe that there is an anime for everyone regardless of their favorite genre, so let's take a deeper look at that. Every suggestion on this list is a well-received show in its respective genre, and is something that I think anyone can watch. With a few exceptions, there are relatively new shows that you can watch within a weekend. That way you don't have to dedicate an entire month to a show that you might end up hating. Anime fans seem to have no concept of time, and when you ask somebody for a suggestion, they will look you dead in the eyes and tell you to watch One Piece. Now, personally, I don't have 410 hours, so let's look at some other options. Action is one of the most popular anime genres, and for good reason. Due to the nature of animated media, normal human limitations can exist here, and as such, fight choreography can be absolutely stellar. Here are the two of the best action anime that have aired recently, and I really think you should give them a try. Our story takes place in a city riddled with drug addicts and violent crimes. One that's practically run by criminals, and where it can be incredibly hard for someone to find any chance of success without getting a little bit of dirt on their hands. Okay, believe it or not, I'm not talking about Detroit. Night City, which happens to be in California, but we're gonna gloss over that, is a place where no one will make it out alive. After a terrible and awful encounter with a street gang, David Martinez ends up in possession of a cybernetic prosthetic, which gives him the ability of super speed at the cost of potentially losing his mind a little bit. With his life up in the air, he meets a girl named Lucy who pulls him into the criminal underworld and gives David a shot at making something out of himself. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is, as you'd expect, an anime based on CD Projekt Red's game, Cyberpunk 2077. Look, we all know that the game's launch was a little bit messy, but the game is in a pretty good place now, and regardless of that, the anime slaps. This sci-fi action anime will have you at the edge of your seat, pun intended, with some of the best action you've ever seen, and then immediately will make you so sad that you just want to turn it off and forget you ever watched it. Then the fights keep going, and the characters are so amazing, and it is honestly kind of a masterpiece. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is one of the only animes that's based on a game that didn't really suck, and given that it's only 10 episodes, I really think you should give it a shot. The majority of us live painfully boring lives, but some of us weren't that lucky and were gifted with the power to see curses. These monsters were born of the negative emotions of those around us. Such a phenomenon is exclusive to Japan, and most of the citizens live blissfully unaware of the dangers around them, much like Yuji Itadori. Aside from being extraordinarily athletic, Yuji is a fairly normal high schooler, but one day he literally bites off more than he can chew and is introduced to the horrors that exist among us. Now, Jujutsu Kaisen is literally everywhere. If you've seen anime, you've probably met some fans of the show. Usually when you're a fan of something, you want other people to enjoy it, right? But for some reason, Jujutsu Kaisen fans would rather just spoil it for everyone instead. Now, as a side, JJK has some of the best fighting animation and choreography in modern anime. This is a product of both pure passion and fairly legal slave labor, but again, we're gonna gloss over that. It resulted in a near masterpiece. While the story can take a backseat at times, the action and characters will pull you in and will have you simping for the cast in no time. The allure and appeal of fantasies is that it gives you something that you can't get elsewhere, something that you'll only be able to experience through the lens of a story. That could be fighting mythical monsters, or wielding magical powers, or even for anime fans, it could be something as simple as talking to a woman. Over the span of 10 years, a group of adventurers embark on a mission to protect the world from the Demon King. During these 10 years, they form an unbreakable bond between them, while forging unforgettable memories along every step of the way. What happens when the Demon King has been defeated? As time continues to pass, the original party members grow old, and as humans do, they begin to die. Except for one of the party members, an elf mage by the name of Frieren. Elves age differently, and as her friends begin to die, Frieren continues her journey, and she thinks back on the adventures that she once had. Now look, I know this sounds depressing as fuck, and look, it kinda can be sometimes, but much like Frieren, this is a journey you will never forget. Hell, sometimes it feels like I'm a part of her group and I'm on the journey with them. The world kind of resembles a video game or an MMORPG, and Frieren takes us alongside her and her new party members. Unlike most adventure shows, we aren't here to experience the journey of defeating the big bad. Instead, we start way after that. The show has impacted me in ways that I never expected based on the synopsis, and it honestly very quickly snuck into being one of my top favorites. There's a reason this show is currently the #1 rated anime on my anime list. Seriously, you need to check it out. If you were reborn into a magical world surrounded by humans, elves, and creatures of all sorts, you'd probably expect to have some kind of magic, right? Well, not for Natsuki Subaru. Yeah, you heard that right, Subaru. Overjoyed to be reborn into his dream world, Subaru is quickly met with the painstaking reality that he doesn't have anything special about him. After living out one of the most hectic days of both of his lives, he's met with a cruel fate and is murdered less than 24 hours after the start of his new life. Following his death, once again, his eyes begin to open, and he realizes that he's in the same spot where he started that day. In fact, everything's the same. People, their conversations, even the events unfold in the exact same way. Subaru was wrong. He wasn't born without any sort of power. His power was the ability to cheat death. ReZero is an incredibly unique take on the fantasy genre and brings you along with a pretty normal man as we experience a new world for the first time together. The trauma that you'll feel losing a loved one is pretty terrible, but what if you had to experience your own death 100 times? This is the reality that our main character faces, and despite this, he still aims to live the perfect life, even if he has to die 1,000 times to get it right. Now, something that I've heard a lot in regards to anime is that comedy anime aren't funny, which is honestly just wrong. Humor can be conveyed in any medium, and while it can be hard to find a comedy anime that resonates with you, I promise some exist. Here are some of my personal favorite comedy shows that transcend the language barrier. Loneliness. Anxiety. Hiding away in your room every day with only your guitar and music as a means to escape the reality while you spend every single day cursing the world for not blessing you with a friend group. Now, all these things probably don't sound very funny to you, and you're not wrong, but Bocchi the Rock says, shut up, dude. Bocchi is not only one of the funniest shows to release in the last few years, but is also, at the same time, one of the best representations of anxiety that I've ever seen. The main character stumbles upon classmates who share her love for music and starts playing in their band, and even though their first show didn't go amazingly, they stick together. Mixing music and comedy, this is a show that a lot of people consider 2023's anime of the year. Bocchi makes you feel, laugh, and even dance alone in your room sometimes. This is honestly the definition of peak. Imagine if you took Harry Potter, but removed the awful author, added comedy, and replaced Harry's magic with a bodybuilding routine that would put Arnold to shame. Stir that all in a magic cauldron, and Mashal is what you get. Set in a world where magic is so integrated into society that those without it are executed, our main character, Mash Bernadette, hides his lack of magic by simply being so strong that his acts of strength may just look magical. After a few oopsies, Mash ends up enrolling at Hogwarts and has to hide his lack of magic while rising to the top of the school. Imagine playing Quidditch without the ability to fly. Seems impossible, right? Nope, fuck you. Imagine writing a test where without magic you can't even get the pencil to write. Again, kind of impossible. Nope, fuck you too. Mashal features some of the most random but consistent comedy that I've ever seen in an anime, and it perfectly adds a mix of action and adventure to the genre. Mashal is a show that I've looked forward to every weekend since it started airing, and it kind of reminds me of watching cartoons as a kid. It's funny, it's entertaining. Mashal is what comedy anime should strive to be. Sometimes you need something a little bit more serious. Something that has you right on the edge of your seat and then goes, punches you right in the gut. Some drama anime would put Korean shows to shame, so here are two that you should check out. In a world where robots are not only perfectly integrated into society, but also programmed to be unable to harm humans, what happens when someone's murdered and all the evidence points towards one of our metallic friends? In Pluto, an android detective seeks to solve this crime before things get out of hand. After one of the legendary 7 war robots is killed, our detective fears the worst, that this murderer plans to rid the world of its protectors before doing something unimaginable. Every once in a while, an author will come around and drop something that is widely considered to be a masterpiece. And Naoki Urasawa did just that with Monster. Monster is considered not only one of the best thriller mangas of all time, but also one of the best animes ever made. On a rare occasion, they might fuck around and do it again, and Naoki did just that with 20th Century Boys, which is personally one of my favorite pieces of media. And then sometimes these assholes will do it again for the 3rd time, and then we get Pluto. It would be selling it short to say that Urasawa is a masterclass in storytelling. Using show don't tell to its fullest, you have to embark on the full journey with them before anything really gets answered. But when it does, I promise, everything will make sense. Okay, look, before we get into this, I'm just gonna get ahead of it. I'm just gonna jump in front of the train here. Look, I know, it's a donghua, okay? And it's pretty fucking great. There's a very good Japanese dub for the show, but honestly, this is, in my opinion, one of the best shows on this entire list. When you think about superpowers, you probably imagine flying through the night sky, or teleporting across the world, Or maybe even blowing up your bully's mind because they found your Naruto collection in 7th grade and that's too nerdy. In the world of Link Click, our main characters are able to go back in time by entering photographs. The twist? They become the person who took the picture. Talk about an invasion of personal space. In order to use these powers for good, they run a shop that seeks to help people by remembering things they once forgot. As with every time travel show ever, they have to be careful about altering the timeline or else they risk destroying everything that they care for. By jumping back in time and literally becoming their clients, they start to feel things that their clients felt once upon a time. It gets ever increasingly more difficult to separate their work and their feelings, and this all culminates into a crazy story. Link Click was the first Chinese anime, or donghua, that I've ever watched, and it quickly became one of my favorite pieces of animation. Link Click is stressful, it's an adventure, it is peak drama, and it is something that you need to check out. Okay, admittedly the horror genre is a little lacking in terms of anime. There's a lot of really solid horror manga, but they kind of have a hard time being adapted. Authors such as Junji Ito are renowned for their exceptional horror literature, but the shows based on his work are kinda not great. Despite all this, there are a few pretty good horror anime to check out. So here are my favorites. Deep in a forest surrounded by nothing but a gate lives a group of orphans, led by one they call Mama. Aside from each other and their mama, these children have no other interaction. They take daily tests and spend most of their time enjoying their life by playing outside and having a good time with each other. Occasionally, one of the orphans gets adopted, but they never come back to the house and visit again. One day, following an adoption, a few children follow their friends as they leave for their new life. And what these kids discover is truly terrifying. The Promised Neverland is one of the best horror anime I have ever seen. Inspiring true fear as you watch, you spend the show rooting for these children as the horrors unfold in front of them. I don't want to say too much more about it, but trust me, after the first episode, you will be hooked. Okay, just disclaimer, there is not a second season, okay? If you watch the first season and you really like it and you're like, oh, how's the second season? You're gonna see something that's called The Promised Neverland Season 2. It doesn't exist. Don't watch it. I promise it is far scarier than anything that they could have done intentionally. Just read the manga or something. I want you to think back to middle school. I know that is a horror in itself, but things were probably a lot simpler. You went to school, hung out with your friends, spent time with your family, and cried into your pillow until you fell asleep. Rinse and repeat. A typical middle school life is the one that Madoka Kaname leads, and everything seems relatively normal until one day a cat-like creature by the name of Kyubey appears and offers her any wish of her choice. But in return, they'll be granted magic, and they have to use it to protect those around them. Now, this might not seem like there's any downside, but it reminds me of what my grandma used to tell me, which is, if a deal from a talking cat is too good to be true, then it probably is. Despite the warnings of another magical girl, Madoka takes this wish and soon learns that not everything is as it seems. Madoka Magica might not sound like a horror show, and I guess it does fall more on the psychological side, but trust me when I say that this show will leave you uncomfortable far beyond what you would expect. This is the oldest show on the list, and you might have to dig a little deep to get past the old animation or the characters' comically large foreheads, but if you can, then Madoka is something you need to experience. As you can tell, I had to dig a little deep for this recommendation, so I'm going to lob you a freebie here. It's not technically an anime, but Castlevania on Netflix is an amazing piece of animation in horror form, so I would recommend checking that out too. Okay, let's be honest. Sports in anime form does not sound like the most entertaining thing ever, but that's where you're wrong. I am not one who is known to partake in sports ball, but there are a few sports anime out there that have actually inspired me to leave my house. It didn't end up happening, but I thought about it and I think that kind of counts for something. Everybody knows that sports are all about coordination, teamwork, sacrifice, and cooperation. This is what team sports are all about. Everybody works together and we all get to have fun. Hinata was obsessed with volleyball since a young age, and he was determined to compete at all costs. Despite his height difference, he seeks to join his team's school with the goal of being the best. In order to succeed, teamwork is needed, and he'll need to place his faith in those around him. Haikyuu is probably the longest show on this list, but it feels wrong not to include it when talking about sports anime. With fluid animation and sound design that will leave you thinking, when the hell did I get on a volleyball court? Haikyuu is a perfect example of what it means to play a sport. Okay. Science fiction is another genre that often misses the mark. There are a lot of sci-fi shows, but not a lot of good sci-fi shows. That's what makes these shows truly stand out. As technology advances and humanity perfects its mastery of artificial intelligence, we reach a point where these AIs are a key part of human life. Every robot is born with a specific mission in mind. They'll follow it throughout their life, and this is what they'll do until they die. Our title character, Vivi, is tasked with making others happy with her singing, but tends to lack an audience at the theme park where she plays. One day, as she gears up for her performance, she's excited to spread happiness, and then, out of fucking nowhere, the robots are killing all the humans and leave us to realize that maybe we should stop using ChatGPT for all of our homework assignments, and we could go back to ignoring Elon Musk's cries for attention and stop putting chips inside of people's brains. Being the first fully self-regulated AI, Vivi gets sent back in time and is told that she needs to stop the slaughter from happening. Her goal? Change history and the relationship between humans and AI. Now, I am not typically the biggest fan of time travel. I usually avoid it because it gets a little messy sometimes, Marvel, but Vivi does it flawlessly. There isn't much more to say other than this is a must-watch for anyone who likes sci-fi shows. In war, there are no winners, only losers. This is especially true for anybody who puts their lives on the line for their country, which is why the Republic of Sang Magnolia has begun to use fully automated robots to fight for them. This leaves no casualties in battle, creating a victimless war. Which is what they want you to believe, but in reality, that's just bullshit. The 86 are a group of people who are seen as different from others, and as such, they are kept hidden from the rest of the world. They're raised in secret and sent off to fodder in this war, manning the robot spider thingies, and sacrificing their lives for a country who never cared about them at all. Leading them in their robot spider thingies is a man known as the Undertaker, the sole survivor of every squadron that he's been a part of, alongside a handler from the Republic who's forced to oversee them, who actually seems to give a shit about them. The 86 embark on their path of despair, with nothing but robot spider thingies and death in their wake. 86 is one of the non-Gundam modern animes that does mechs better than anything else. When you couple this with a beautiful story, animation, and cast, you get something really, really special. Now, I know Disney isn't technically really a genre on its own, but according to my very white sister, Disney is all that you need. While there aren't any Japanese Disney movies, there are a few that rival its quality, and these are the ones that you should check out. Studio Ghibli films are a lot of people's first foray into anime, and often they don't even realize it. I know a ton of people who grew up with masterpieces like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and Kiki's Delivery Service, and to them, it was just another animated film. Studio Ghibli films are second to none. Originally, the man behind the magic, Miyazaki, had retired, but after being, and he said this, not me, horrified by his son's work, he returned to release The Boy and the Heron in 2023. While many have mixed opinions on this film, and a lot of people saw it as very confusing, Miyazaki has said that he will continue to make more films in the future, so things look kind of promising for us. The other set of films I would strongly recommend you check out are the Makoto Shinkai movies. Most known for combining romance with the supernatural, Shinkai brings beautifully crafted stories and raises the bar with astonishing animation. Most known for the film Your Name, or more recently, Suzume. Seriously, watching these movies reminds me of how it felt to watch Ghibli or even Disney films as a child. This is a special feeling that I would not trade for anything. Look, if you've made it this far, you deserve a little treat. Here are some shows that ignore all the rules that I set, but they hold a special place in my heart. These are what I call certified bangers. These 3 shows are all shows that I personally would rate 10 out of 10. Now I know they might not be for everyone, but if my little synopsis interests you at all, I strongly recommend checking them out. Death is something that all forms of life deal with. No matter who you are or what you are, death is where you'll end up eventually. But what happens when we die? This is something I've troubled myself with for most of my life, and for a good reason. That shit's terrifying. After waking up without his memory, Otanashi gets to learn what happens to us after death, and in this case, doesn't really put his mind at ease. It's that somewhere in the afterlife exists a group of high school age students who felt cheated by life and were never really given a fair shot to experience what their peers did. After dying, they made the choice to rebel against God and refuse to be reborn as whatever the universe may choose. Well skeptical at first, Otanashi joins the rebels, but continues to question if there's more to this than meets the eye. Angel Beats is the type of show that when you watch once, you'll find yourself thinking about it years later. It certainly isn't a show for everyone, but if you do find a connection to this at all, I promise it'll stick with you forever. Sticking on the topic of the afterlife, when you die, typically you'd expect to go to heaven or hell. But what if I told you there was actually a mysterious third option, somewhere that only really special people get to go to? A bar called the Quindecim. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey Luker, my dad left for that bar 12 years ago, and he's not coming back, John, I'm sorry. Quindecim exists as the middle ground between heaven and hell, a sorting place to discover where one should end up after death. Do they sort people, you ask? With a bartender and goofy fun games, of course. Have you ever thought you'd play a Street Fighter game where the loser goes to hell? How about darts? Quindecim has it all. Death Parade is different. Not only is it incredibly unique, but it builds and sunsets a fully fleshed out story in the span of 12 episodes. It deals with an immensely heavy topic in a relatively light way, all while making you think, do I deserve to go to heaven? It shows us both the good and the bad in people, and it challenges your perspective on morality in a way that only something truly special could. Following the crushing defeat of Japan, the nation of Britannia has taken over and left the remaining Japanese populace to rot in poverty in what is known as Area 11. Lelouch, a genius student once seen as a prince, gets caught in the crossfire of Britannian soldiers and Japanese rebels. When all hope seems lost, he's saved by someone named Cece, who grants him the gift of the Geas, power hidden in his eye that allows him to bestow a command upon someone that must be followed. With this new ability, Lelouch embarks on a journey of revenge and seeks to return Japan to their original glory. For some unknown reason, in the early 2000s, a bunch of mangakas got together and said, hey, you know what's cool? Magical eye powers. They were goddamn right, that shit is cool. So many shows have beaten this trope into the ground, but when it's done right, the animation can be a bit wonky at times, and sure, the show is literally a walking Pizza Hut ad, but I can't judge someone for getting their bag. Code Geass is more than a mech battle anime. It's a battle of wits, it's intelligent, it's thought-provoking, and there's always a trick up its sleeve. Code Geass is one of the shows that originally hooked me on anime, and it is widely seen as one of, if not the best endings in the entire medium. Much like any other form of media, there's no right way to get into anime, and as long as you're having fun, who am I to judge? Unless you watch some weird shit, then I will absolutely be judging. Anime can take you on some of the most compelling journeys. It can lift your mood when you're down, and it can even change the way you look at life. I hope the Beginner's Guide to Anime has helped you figure out where to start. If you've made it this far, consider checking out another one of my videos. YouTube really thinks you'd like this one right here, so do yourself a favor and click it.